Hello and welcome back to Calathea. In the last episode we made a start on the city centre. It did end up being a bit of a grid and it's not like me to use a grid structure, but I put a lot of attention to detail into the high-rise apartments, high-density commercial blocks and the unique buildings that bring in a huge amount of tourists. I connected the city centre up to the train station with a footpath and a lot of people using this to walk rather than taking vehicles. And I also put in a metro system which has revolutionised the traffic on this map. Buses which used to be overrun are now barely being used and the roads are definitely a lot quieter. So it's looking all round positive so far. Housing is still the highest demand. So in today's episode we're going to be building a rural high density town with Mediterranean style buildings. So the first build for this series was a Mediterranean-inspired town and farm industry area that is very far away from the rest of the city, so it is quite rural. And it's got a lot of these white buildings with the terracotta roofs, and I tried to keep the facility buildings in theme with a medical centre and a fire station down here, a high school and an elementary school that all look like they belong, and a tiny bit of commercial. The train station even comes from the same creator that made those assets, so that really fits in as well. So today's build is going to be similar to this one, but we're going to be working with high density housing. The high density housing isn't huge, it's more of a medium density, if you could even call it that. So we're going to be working with this piece of land over here on the other side of the farm to the Mediterranean town. It starts to slope off a bit towards the beach, but we're not going to be working all the way up there. We're going to be building a little bit further inland and leaving the beach for something else. So I've taken inspiration from the skyline in Barcelona for this town, where all of the buildings are pretty much the same height across the board. Nothing is too high, nothing is too low, and in a lot of places they have very small square and rectangular blocks of these medium density, multi-purpose residential and commercial buildings. So I've only got a few high density assets, so it may end up looking pretty samey, but to be honest that's not too far off of what places like Barcelona actually look like. There's not huge variation in the building style.
This is just editing Mads coming in to say that I made it sound like Barcelona is a really boring place in my voiceover on the recording, but it is far from that. There is some amazing, unique and very ahead of its time architecture in Barcelona, especially by people like Antoni Gaudi. The Sagrada Familia is one of the most amazing buildings I've ever seen, and it's nowhere near finished. They've been building it for over 100 years and they've still got a long way to go. There are these pockets of super unique architecture dotted around the city that you wouldn't even notice if you weren't looking up. And I just wanted to mention that the inspiration that I was taking from Barcelona for this build was more of a kind of general overview of the skyline and the city planning and the very generic Mediterranean building style, rather than a fully accurate representation of what the city is like from an architectural standpoint. So please don't berate me in the comments.
So I'm going to be using footpaths to break up the blocks rather than roads every time, because otherwise we're going to end up with a million nodes and a million junctions and no one's going to be able to get around. Hopefully this should also make the town a lot more walkable, but it's going to be fairly small, so I'm not too worried about them not being able to get from place to place. The assets that I've got for this are fairly small, as in 2 to 3 squares deep, so it's not going to be anywhere near on the same scale as the other districts, but I think I'm going to have fun with this one. So let's get building. Okay, I think I'm just about done with this district. I'm trying to decide whether I think it looks silly or I think it looks in theme, because on the one hand this looks like an aerial view of any city in Spain that's got this kind of style, but on the other hand it does look a little bit silly in this game from far away when all of the details disappear and it's just a bunch of squares and rectangles. But I think it definitely works for the theme. These assets are great. I had to reset them quite a few times to get the colours to be right because they vary between like a yellowy cream to a darker pink. I tried to change all of the ones that we can at least see on this side so they're all consistent within their blocks. So this is largely residential with a small amount of commercial and some services and a unique building. There's an elementary school down here with a large playground and the paths go between the buildings here. And there's also this kind of central park bit in the centre of the town as well. Because these blocks had to be so small to fit these assets on perfectly, I wanted there to be something big in the middle to kind of draw the focus to, because these blocks are only 4 deep and actually working on this kind of scale is so much smaller. I forgot how different it is building with these size assets because it's been so long since I did the last Mediterranean build. But I really like it. I think they look really good. These assets look very in theme. They're a lot more kind of upmarket than the first Mediterranean build we did, obviously because they're high rise, but they've got the brickwork on the bottom. Some windows have these little balconies, some have open shutters, some are closed. So it gives a nice bit of variety to the facade. So down here as you come in, there's a small row of commercial with a few bits of residential dotted in between. These assets here are commercial assets from the workshop. It came in a pack of a bunch of various different European themed buildings, and I tried to pick the ones that were the most Spanish looking, so the ones with the terracotta roofs basically. There's a pathway running down the middle of this block going across from here to here and down the middle up to the main road and onto this road as well. I thought I would do this because of this asset here, because it has detailing on 2 different sides but it's got a very sharp angle at this end. So even though they won't actually be able to get in on this side, I thought it would look nice for them to be able to walk past it. I just put some hedges along the edges here just to soften them off because it's quite a harsh difference between the concrete and the grass, and there was a few bits that I couldn't quite get with the painter tool, and I didn't want to add too many of the brush assets from the park catalogue. Over here again is a bit of high density commercial. They are complaining that they haven't got enough goods to sell, so I'm worried that some of these are just going to disappear any second. This again is from the same pack as the other European ones. The small Mediterranean fire station behind here. These pieces are pretty cool. I've been waiting to use these, but they're very thin and they've got detailing on 3 sides, so you kind of have to do them in these very thin blocks. But I thought they looked all right, kind of back to back with each other. And I had to kind of bring them in a little bit because this block was a bit too wide for them, but it's not the end of the world. I think it looks all right. This is a little bit more thrown together, and we are going to just ignore that one. Oh, look, there's a building gone. I thought that was going to happen in a second. Expect to see more of that as I'm going around because they're really not doing well with the commercial, and yeah, that one's going to go as well. So you get the gist. It's a bunch of European Mediterranean buildings put together. Now this is actually a unique building. I think it's a European town halls from the workshop, and it isn't exactly the kind of style that I wanted. It's a bit too orange on the facade for me, but I think the roof goes really well with this district and the square style as well, with all of these square rectangular blocks. I think it just fits in quite nicely, and it will bring lots of tourists to the area. Back here is a huge police precinct. This I think has space for 60 vehicles, so it should cover quite a wide area. And there's a secondary school here. There's a small amount of parking down here because there was a bit of a gap between the school and the road. I didn't quite know what to put in there, so I put some parking. I didn't want to make this district parking heavy because obviously the cars can park on the roads, and I feel like it's a lot more normal to find cars parked on a road in a European town than it is to find a parking lot. But I needed something very small and thin and long to fill that gap. So within the 5 minutes that I've been doing this walkthrough, we've already lost half of our commercial, which probably means that I need to focus on industry in the near future. I was considering putting a train station in for this district, but there's a train station down here that is not that far away at all from this district. So what I might do instead is put a bus route that goes from this district up to the train station and then back again. So almost like the shuttles that we've had in other districts. So I'm going to very quickly do that now. Okay, so I put in the bus route. It will take a while for the bus to get down here because it's coming from quite a way away over here, but it will mean that anyone wanting to get into the rest of the city over on this side of the map will be able to do that on public transport a lot easier. So I think I'm going to end this episode here. It's just a short one today because, like I mentioned in my last Paloma Valley episode, I am under a lot of pressure at the moment with my day job because my products are going to be stocked in 2 different shops that are both opening within the next couple of weeks. So I'm very, very busy getting all of my stuff ready for them to go in, but hopefully once I've done that, I'll be able to do larger builds and longer episodes again. I think for the next episode, it's time to focus back on industry again because they are really struggling with their commercial. So the only industry area that we haven't done so far is oil. And I actually originally had that planned as my 3rd episode, but they were so in need of housing at that point in this city build that it wasn't actually possible for me to do the oil industry area because it would have just all demolished itself straight away. So we're finally going to get onto that, and that's going to include a cargo transport method. So hopefully that should help with all of the commercial buildings that are desperately needing goods being imported because the roads are getting very busy. It should give them another means to get to the city. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.